Hello everyone and welcome to the third part of the video lecture series of strategic management. Today we are going to discuss the process of strategic management. This is a standard practice which I have represented here, but there might be deviations. A few boxes might be shuffled here and there in the due course of designing the process or implementing the strategy. Some shuffling might be done. Sometimes it might be needed for a company to skip a step as shown here. So we will discuss that later on, but first of all let us look at the basic process, the standard process of strategic management. How a strategy is designed and what are the activities which are carried out after a strategy is designed, how its outcomes are achieved, and so on. Well, the process begins with organizational objectives. Organizational objectives, or as we also know them as strategic intent, is nothing but a statement of organizational position, what position the organization wishes to be in the future, what position the organization sees itself in the present. As in, is it a market leader, is it a challenger, is it a lagger, does it want to become a market leader, does it want to expand in the future into global markets or restrict itself to a certain geography only? Does it only wish to serve FMCG or whether it has certain plans in the back of its mind to enter into electronics as well? Does e-commerce company wish to only continue with its e-commerce offerings, or whether it wants to enter the brick and mortar space also? So, depending on what a company wishes to achieve in the future and how it sees itself in the present, a company will define vision, mission, goals and objectives. And all of these together, they are called as the strategic intent. So, intent, as we know, is a reflection of purpose that a person, or in this case a company, might have. So, strategic intent or the organizational objectives have to be defined first. The company must identify what it wishes to become in the future. From a strategic management perspective, the present perception of the company will not matter, as in what it believes that it is at this moment, whether it is a second position challenger or a lagger or a global player or a purely regional or local player, it will not matter. For the design of strategy, the only thing that matters while defining organizational objectives is what it wants to become in the future. So, in the future business environment, where does the company wishes to see itself? Where does the company wish to see itself? Whether it wants to become a top 3 player, whether it wants to become the best, whether it wants to become the largest. Normally we have only the superlatives. We use these superlative terms. Okay, we become best in the service category, deliver joy, or there are varied examples of use of these superlative terms in the vision statement. We will come to vision, mission, goals and objectives and their particular or respective definitions later on. For the time being, we just need to understand that the first step in designing a strategy involves defining organizational objectives. Moving on, appraising the environment. Now we know that the organization operates in a business environment. It has internal and external stakeholders and hence business environments. So, for each environment, the internal as well as external, it needs to conduct before proceeding to the strategy, before proceeding to the formulation or implementation of the strategy, it needs to understand what are its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Are there a lot of threats in the market out there? Are a lot of new entrants rushing into this market right now? Right now, this market may be very less competitive or very comfortable for the company, but in the future, does it seem like a lot of players are going to come and populate this market and the margins might reduce? Does the company envision such a future for this market? So, appraising the environment basically involves appraising what opportunities and threats lie in the outside environment, what are its internal strengths and weaknesses through various tools of analysis which we will further on look into. Formulation of strategy, basically this step involves designing or identifying what strategy is going to be a best fit for the company. For that, the company has to understand that a set of or a whole bucket of strategies, available options are there for it to choose, and normally only one strategy is chosen or formulated for a certain situation, because as we said in the first video of strategic management that huge enormous budget allocations are done for each strategy. That is why out of the available options only one best fit strategy is chosen, is formulated, is designed. This is the design phase, is designed for the organization, and then we will move on to implement it. Implementation will involve all sorts of resource allocations. Here the budget allocation that I was talking about, here it is put into action. Budget is allocated to different heads, to different functions, and money is distributed. People are hired if the necessity be so, people might be hired or fired as the situation dictates, and behavioral transformation is brought about in employees. Change is managed because obviously a new strategy would mean a lot of change. The company might undergo a lot of change. So, change management, that would be a part of implementation also. Resource allocation, functional implementation, all such steps, we will look into each of these steps later on. They will all be implemented at this level, and finally, further we proceed towards the evaluation of strategy. Just like we have put in a certain effort into something, into building our career or maybe purchasing an equipment, whatever effort we have put into it, we might wish to see, we would like to see that this effort has borne fruit, has borne the fruit that we desire. Now, it might give an outcome which is desirable, purchasing a electronic gadget or going into a vacation at a beautiful place. Now, the effort and the investment and the time that we spent in making these decisions, we would like for all these decisions to yield a favorable outcome, right? But it is in the real world, as we know, it might not be so always the case. So, that is why evaluation involves what did we expect, comparison of what did we expect, what we expected from a certain strategy, from the implementation of a certain strategy, and what was the actual outcome of the strategy. So, the desired outcome versus the actual outcome. Evaluation involves a comparison of these two. So, that is basically the evaluation of strategy. Obviously, if there is a positive deviation, the company will might like to consolidate upon the successful implementation of the strategy. But if there is a negative deviation, strategic control is a must if there is a negative deviation. If employee satisfaction has reduced, if customer satisfaction has reduced, if synergy arising synergy from the combination of two entities is not happening, then probably we need to take certain corrective actions in the form of strategic control. So, And this strategic control, it feeds back, as you would see in the diagram, it feeds back into all these blocks. Why is that? It is because corrective action might be needed in the implementation of strategy, or perhaps we have defined wrong visions, we have defined improper or unachievable targets for ourselves. Maybe we went wrong in appraising the environment. Maybe our internal strengths, we underestimated our strengths, or we overestimated our strengths. We ignored our weaknesses probably. We underestimated the threat of new entrants. So many things can happen. Many mistakes can happen in designing a strategy, because that is the inherent disadvantage of scientific approach. Scientific approach, as I discussed in the first video, that scientific approach involves making assumptions, preparing certain observations, or making observations and taking decisions, and then checking whether these decisions are correct or not, time and again reviewing the assumptions and probing each of the outcomes, each of the inputs for correctness. So the scientific approach has an inherent disadvantage. It imbibes problems due to its basic design. So that is how any of these activities might have problems. So that is why strategic control feeds into each and every of these blocks, and changes must be brought about. If required, they must be brought about in any or all of these blocks. That will be the process of strategic management.